Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at noon, the White House expresses disappointment over Pyongyang's decision not to let a U.S. envoy visit North Korea to negotiate the release of detained American Kenneth Bae. But a former U.S. diplomat's visit to Pyongyang raises hopes he might bring Bae home. As the OECD releases an improved economic outlook for advanced economies, China faces a tough road ahead as it aims to steer away from export-driven growth. Plus, for the first time since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, top policymakers from China and Taiwan are set to discuss greater economic cooperation and press freedom. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Choi Yuzan in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. The White House says it's very disappointed North Korea decided to cancel an invitation for the top U.S. human rights envoy to visit Pyongyang to discuss the release of imprisoned American missionary Kenneth Bae.
But there may be some light at the end of the tunnel as a former U.S. ambassador to South Korea landed in Pyongyang on Monday on unspecified business. Our Yurian starts us off.
The United States has expressed its deep regret over North Korea's decision to withdraw its invitation to U.S. human rights envoy Robert King to discuss the release of Korean-American Kenneth Bae.
Well, I can tell you that we are deeply disappointed by the DPRK decision for a second time to rescind its invitation for Ambassador King to travel to Pyongyang to discuss Kenneth Bae's release.
While the reason for the withdrawal is not yet clear, a State Department official said it could be related to the upcoming joint military drill between South Korea and the U.S. The White House drew a clear line between the two issues.
We remind the DPRK that the U.S. ROK military exercises are transparent, regularly scheduled, and defense-oriented. These exercises are in no way linked to Mr. Bae's case, and we believe they know that.
The White House says it will continue to push North Korea to agree to let King visit. But hopes for Bae's quick release haven't completely faded. On Monday, North Korea received a delegation led by former U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Donald Gregg, who experts believe will aim to win Bae his freedom. Without offering details on his unannounced visit to Pyongyang, Gregg merely stated he was glad to be back.
Very happy to be back in Pyongyang, my first time in about 8 years, so we're looking forward to talks and happy to see you. Thank you.
Gregg served as Washington's envoy to Seoul from 1989 to 1993 and has since called for greater engagement with North Korea. And his surprise visit is raising hopes for Bae's swift release. Bae was arrested by North Korean authorities after entering the country in November 2012 and was later sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for alleged crimes against the state. Yurian, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is putting a bold new emphasis on agriculture and changing what he sees as an equal but highly unproductive distribution system. Our Kwon So-a has this report.
Kim Jong-un is trying to drive competition in his country's agriculture sector. In a letter to agricultural leaders released after a national conference, Kim signaled that he plans to make reforms to the current system. He emphasized the need to boost productivity by accelerating farmers' efforts, saying the current equal distribution system is the reason for a lack of enthusiasm. He added the current system, which distributes a fixed amount of produce to farm workers, does not go hand in hand with the state's socialist principles. Individuals' efforts will be incentivized in the future to build a more competitive structure.
Apart from the amount of harvest fixed by the country, workers who made extra efforts should receive extra compensation.
Kim also is pushing ahead with a system which was briefly introduced in 2002, which gives part of a field to 3 to 5 people and ranks their compensation according to their productivity. While the changes reflect Kim Jong-un's ambitious plans to revitalize the economy, it remains to be seen whether the new system will be able to surmount the nation's chronic food shortages. Kwon So-a, Arirang News.
And a former U.S. point man on North Korea visiting Seoul this week had something to say about ways to curb Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program. Our Kim Jong-il has more.
Christopher Hill said the road to peace on the Korean peninsula will be a difficult one, but that stronger relations among Korea, China, and Japan could be the key to achieving the goal.
I think we could improve the North Korean attitude if we have better coordination and cooperation involving China and Japan. So my hope is that we can do that and that we can have a closer understanding of how to proceed in a six-party context.
Speaking in an address to the National Assembly on Monday, the former U.S. ambassador to South Korea, who also led the U.S. delegation to the six-party talks on denuclearizing North Korea, also spoke about the prospects for a resumption of the talks. He said that in the event the talks resume, the five parties of South Korea, the U.S., Japan, China, and Russia need to agree that Pyongyang not be allowed to have or develop nuclear weapons.
The North Korean commitment was to abandon all of its nuclear programs, and for this reason, that has to be the starting point, not the ending point of any subsequent negotiations.
Hill also took aims at hardliners in the U.S., who he said seemed to be more interested in criticizing negotiations with North Korea than preventing the North from having nuclear weapons. He said they are actually giving Pyongyang the hope that if they just stick to their guns, they will eventually be allowed to become a nuclear state in Northeast Asia. Mr. Hill said the most important part of any roadmap to peace and reunification for the two Koreas is that they do a lot more talking together. He also said the six-party talks are the best way to kickstart inter-Korean cooperation, describing them as a stepping stone towards reunification. Kim Jong-il, Arirang News.
The South Korean government's economic policies are being put through the ringer at the National Assembly on this Tuesday, and Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Kwon So-a is the Park administration's man in the hot seat. The ruling Saenuri Party is focusing on what the government is doing to achieve a 70% employment rate and a per capita income of $40,000 during President Park's term. The ruling party also wants the government to collect and disclose information about public sector organizations that are laxly or unethically managed. The main opposition Democratic Party is urging the government to move cautiously with free trade agreements and come up with better protective measures for farmers, saying their average income is just 80% of the national average.
The savings rate of Korea's manufacturing firms has more than doubled in the last 30 years. And while tucking more money away might be good news for a person, the opposite tends to be true for businesses. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance said on Tuesday that the firm's savings rate jumped from 7.4% in 1975 to over 15% in 2011. After evaluating the savings rate of other OECD members, Korean firms had the fourth highest savings rate, up 8 notches from the year 2000. Experts say the government should provide incentives to prevent companies from excessive saving, as that money could be used to invest and grow the firm. Japan was top of the savings list, followed by the Netherlands and Estonia. Those with the lowest savings rates were Portugal, France, and Italy. Now, growth is expected to pick up in the most advanced economies during the first half of this year, with the overall recovery being led by the US and Japan. But it's a different story for emerging economies, whose forecast is less upbeat. Kim Min-ji reports.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development expects major nations to show signs of firm growth over the first 6 months of the year. In its latest economic report released Monday, the OECD said its leading indicator covering 33 member countries had reached its highest level in almost 3 years in December last year, a sign that growth is firming. The OECD Index of Composite Leading Indicators showed that overall growth condition of the member states was above trend, rising to 100.9 in the last month of 2013, edging up from 100.8 in November. The CLI shows how the economy will fare over the next 6 months by measuring the current industrial output, financial market conditions, and the gross domestic product of each nation. A reading above 100 means economic expansion, while one below shows otherwise. The overall recovery is forecast to be driven by quickening economic growth in the United States and Japan. The OECD index showed that the U.S. stood at 101 in December, up from 100.9 in the previous month, the highest level since the global financial crisis in March 2008. For the same period, Japan saw its reading edge up to 101.4 from 101.3, also the highest level since the financial crisis. The 18-nation Eurozone also saw its reading jump to 101.1 from 100.8. However, the OECD painted a different picture for emerging economies, with growth trends looking less rosy. China's reading stood at 99.3 in December, unchanged from the previous month. Many analysts say that the Chinese economy could slow this year as Beijing plans to shift its focus away from exports and investment to domestic spending and consumption. Russia's indicator also remains stable at 99.7, while India dropped to 97 from 97.2. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, China and Taiwan are gearing up for their first government-to-government meeting since their split in 1949. During the historic meeting that is set for later today, the two sides are expected to renew their political and economic ties. Kim Jong-un reports.
China and Taiwan are about to begin their highest-level talks in more than 6 decades. Zhang Zijin, the head of China's Taiwan Affairs Office, and his Taiwanese counterpart Wang Wuqi are to meet in China's eastern city of Nanjing on Tuesday afternoon. The two sides are likely to discuss ways to pursue economic reconciliation, and Beijing may push for passage of a stall-free trade agreement with Taiwan. Many expect the meeting could become the basis for a future summit between Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Taiwanese counterpart Ma Ying-jeou, possibly around the time of this year's APEC summit in Beijing in October. China and Taiwan split at the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949. China regards Taiwan as part of its territory and has said repeatedly that it will reclaim the island, while Taiwan wants to be seen as an independent country. The conflict has created a decades-long military standoff between the United States and China, as the U.S. is committed to defending the democracy-based Taipei against communist Beijing. Ties between China and Taiwan improved radically after Taiwan's pro-Beijing President Ma Ying-jeou was elected in 2008. Since then, tours from mainland China have boosted Taiwan's economy. Taiwanese technology firms have expanded in the mainland, their investments worth billions of dollars. But there is also speculation that the friendly terms will not last, since President Ma and his pro-Beijing policy is deeply unpopular among the Taiwanese people. Analysts say Ma's Kuomintang party is likely to lose local elections slated for later in the year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
A second round of talks aimed at bringing peace to Syria got off to a shaky start in Geneva Monday as hundreds of civilians continue to flee the besieged city of Homs under an unextended humanitarian deal between the Syrian government and the United Nations. UN Arab League envoy Lakhdar Brahimi has been holding separate meetings with the government and opposition to try to set an agenda for the coming week. Little progress is expected as the two sides continue to disagree on President Bashar al-Assad's future role in Syria. The talks come as the UN and aid agencies continue efforts to help thousands of people trapped in homes who now have until Wednesday to try and get out. The Iranian military has successfully test-fired 2 new domestically made missiles. On the state television, Defense Minister Hossein Dekane said the long-range ballistic missile, dubbed Bina, or insightful in English, has radar-evading capabilities and can be used as a laser-guided surface-to-surface missile. Iran already possesses long-range surface-to-surface Shahab missiles with a range about 2,000 kilometers that are capable of hitting Israel and several U.S. military bases in the Middle East. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, who had reportedly only recently stated his opposition to further missile tests, also issued a congratulatory message for the successful test firings.
The European Union has given a slap on the wrist to embattled Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. During talks in Brussels on Monday, foreign ministers from the 28-member bloc said it was high time Yanukovych took steps to form a new inclusive government and institute reforms that would pave the way to free and fair presidential elections. Ukraine has been rocked by months of anti-government protests sparked by the president's refusal to sign an agreement with the EU in favour of closer ties with Russia instead. The EU foreign ministers also said they were deeply concerned by the human rights situation, including violence, cases of missing persons, torture and intimidation as part of the Ukrainian government's crackdown against demonstrators. Now, months after Typhoon Haiyan devastated the Philippines, Korean engineers and medics are rebuilding schools and hospitals and offering free medical care to local residents as part of ongoing relief efforts. Kim Yong-bin sent us this report from Tacloban.
This is a cemetery for victims of Typhoon Haiyan in Leyte province, though some burials are not so formal and are marked by roadside plots. Large sections of the province were devastated last November when it was struck by what was one of the strongest tropical storms on record, which killed thousands and displaced millions more. For the survivors, there isn't much left, and international aid has poured in. Korea is one of the many countries that have sent relief workers to help the area rebuild. As you know, military engineers and medics chose the name Arirang, which means sun and hope in Tagalog, as a reminder of its mission to help the locals reach for a bright future. For now, the Arirang unit is focused on rebuilding schools and hospitals. They also provide free meals to roughly 500 children, as they have done each day since their arrival in late December.
This is one of the hospitals that was rebuilt by the Arirang unit. What's even more amazing is that they had it up and running in less than a month. Another step in helping the people here get back on their feet.
Apart from the engineers focused on reconstruction, there are dozens of doctors and nurses here, giving free medical care to area residents.
I just came here for check-up for my baby. For everything is free. Here in Telegrapo, no money, no medication for our illness.
Every member of the Arirang unit is a volunteer who is trying to make a difference in the world.
The Arirang unit's slogan is to become one and complete our mission for the good of humanity. With that in mind, we will give more of our love to the locals before our mission is complete.
The unit is providing free medical equipment and healthcare services to people in the 3 major districts in Leyte province that were hit the hardest by the typhoon. Kim Yong-bin, Arirang News, Tacloban.
And a good Tuesday to you all as we kick off our Sochi coverage with the men's 500-meter speed skating event. Now, with Mo Tae-bum being one of the favorites to win a medal at the event, things didn't turn out the way everyone thought. Now, despite a fairly good start as he finishes the first race with the final time of 34.84 seconds, the South Korean speed skater finished the second race with the final time of 34.85 seconds for a combined 69.69 seconds to finish fourth overall. And while the Vancouver gold medalist failed to stand on the podium this time, the Netherlands continued to dominate the sport, sweeping all 3 medals as Mitchell Mulder, Jan Smeekers, and Ronald Mulder took the podium in the event. Well, the quest for Korea's first medal never got close during the men's 1500 short track event, as Lee Han-bin was the only Korean skater to qualify for the finals. And it looked like the pressure was too much for the 25-year-old. And with Lee Han-bin never looking sharp in the final race, he would fall to 6th place in the final. But Russia's Victor An, or An Hyun-soo, did manage to finish with a bronze medal, claiming his first Olympic medal in 8 years. And while his 3rd place finish gave some joy to the Korean fans, it was Charles Hamlin of Canada who finished first, followed by China's Tian Yu-han. Also, good news for all the fans here in the nation, as the South Korean women's short track team dominated during the 500-meter and the 3,000-meter relay. Now, first off, all 3 Korean skaters, Shim Seok-hee, Kim Arirang, and Park Seung-hee, advanced during the 500-meter heats. But it was during the women's 3,000-meter relay semis where Park Seung-hee, Shim Seok-hee, Kong Sang-jung, and Cho Hae-ri absolutely dominated, as they're set to go after the gold medal on the 18th. And now taking a look at some key competitions to look forward to on day 4 of the Sochi Winter Games for those following the Korean athletes. Now, first off, the women's curling team will be facing off against Japan during their round-robin session 2, as they hope to continue to surprise everyone in the sport. But the biggest event on the day will be speed skater Lee Sang-hwa going after her 2nd straight gold medal in the event, as she hopes to claim Korea's first medal during the 500-meter women's speed skating event. All right, let's finish things off by taking a look at the medal count so far after 3 days of competition. Of course, taking a look at the chart here, Canada in 1st place after earning a late gold medal during the freestyle skiing event for a total of 3 gold, 3 silver, and 1 bronze. Netherlands in 2nd with 3 gold medals as well, with Norway dropping down to 3rd place. Meanwhile, Russia now in 6th place with 6 medals so far. Well, that's going to wrap it up for me now. For this has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Let's now get an update on the forecast with our Lee Ji-yeon at the Weather Center. Hello there, Ji-yeon.
Good afternoon. Well, you know, the snow that's falling in Gangwon-do and parts of the East Coast has caused a lot of trouble for area residents.
Yes, I heard the snow they're getting is very heavy and also wet, which sounds quite unusual. But can you tell us what wet snow is?
Of course. Well, wet snow tends to be 33% heavier than dry snow because it contains so much moisture, and that makes snow removal work much more difficult than usual. But luckily, the snow clouds in the east will go away this afternoon, so hopefully that will provide some relief. Now, let's shift gears to the forecast for the rest of the country. We had a cold start to the day, but we will have a relatively mild afternoon with temperatures that should be similar to yesterday, with mostly to partly sunny skies throughout the day. And this week, we can expect a typical late winter weather pattern with chilly mornings turning to milder afternoons, but we do have another round of snow in store later in the week for Gangwon-do area. And in Sochi, where the Olympics are going at full steam, There will be some morning showers, but that should let up in the afternoon, and the day should get sunnier with a top temperature hiking up to 11 degrees Celsius. With that, let's take a closer look at the readings for Korea. The afternoon high in Seoul will get up to 4. Daegu and Gwangju will see a high of 4 and 6 respectively, while Busan will top out at 5. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju will climb up to 5 in the afternoon. Daejeon will rise to 4, while the top temperature on Mount Kumgang will be at -11. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and let's send it back to Mark and Yusan in the studio.
Okay, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there as always. And those are pretty much the stories we're following at this hour. Things aren't going that well for Korea at the Winter Olympics at the moment, but hopes are high. Team Korea might be able to win its first Olympic gold medal in Sochi later on this Tuesday.
That's right. Korean speed skater Lee Sang-hwa will attempt to win her second Olympic gold at the women's 500-meter speed skating event, and we wish her the best of luck. Yep. Join us again tomorrow, right here on NEWSLINE at noon.